Okay, hello all you crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games, and I am going to do something that I have never actually done before. At least I've never actually put it into practice before. And that is the subject of making these things clickable. When you click on something, at the current moment, if you click on a tower, you just spawn another tower if you have enough money. If you go into edit mode and you like spawn a tree or something, and you were to click on the tree, where's the tree? There's a tree. You would just spawn something else. You wouldn't be able to select the previously selected tree, and I'm going to be getting around to dealing with that. So for both like the level editor half of this program, which is preferably going to not be very complicated because I don't want to spend too much time on it, and for the actual gameplay, for the sake of selecting towers, you're going to be able to need to click on things. If this was a completely top-down game, you might be able to like fake it by just making these things rectangles, even if the rest of the game is 3D, and then you could just check to see if the mouse was like intersecting the bounding box of the thing in 2D. But since this is a fully 3D perspective camera, it's going to have to be a little bit more complicated than that. I'm going to have to write some 3D collision code, whether I want to or not. I do not want to go all out in 3D collision code in this series. I want to just have the bare minimum that I need to make everything work. I am currently working on off recording a 3D collision system, but that is not like anywhere near ready for me to just drop into this project the way I did with Luminous Chickens. So we're gonna have to be making do. I love how the bullets are just like frozen in midair because the game is paused in edit mode. Anyway. The specific piece of 3D collision logic that I'm going to need is going to be a ray and a bounding box, a rectangle, a non-rotated rectangle, an axis-aligned bounding box, and I'm going to need to see if they intersect. Essentially, this is going to be a raycast. I've talked about those before in the 3D collision DLL videos. You are allowed to do those in native GML if you know what the math looks like. I have math over here, and this is what it looks like. I'm going to see if I can like adapt that to this game as quickly as possible, but first I need to do a little bit of setup. So I'm going to make, I think, let's see, if towers could be approximated by spheres, this would be quite a bit easier. If you saw the ray sphere collision code that that was also on the screen when I flashed GMeta over, you might see that it's quite a bit simpler, but towers can't really be approximated with spheres. I'm going to be going with axis-aligned bounding boxes because essentially rectangles can approximate most things pretty easily. Let's make some collision information. So let's see. I'm going to object orient the heck out of this. Am I? No, I'm really not. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, like, the reason that I'm not is because of the aforementioned overhead that is incurred when calling functions in GameMaker, and I do want to minimize that because this is something that can be happening potentially often. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach something to entities, and that is going to be, let's say, the bounding box. And it's going to have a min and a max. There's a couple ways you can define such a thing. You can have an origin and a size, a vector 3 representing the origin and a vector 3 representing the size. You can have a minimum point and a maximum point. I'm going to be going with, I think, that, because yeah, I'm going to be going with a minimum and maximum size. And let's call those P1 and P2. I would totally just call it min and max, but as you're probably aware, if you use GameMaker, those are already built-in functions and you cannot use them as another name. So P1 and P2 it is. P1 is going to be a new vector 3. And how big are all these models? This is information I'm going to, I think, want to load out of the file, or at least load out of a file, but that's not what I wanted to do. Let me open Project in Explorer, and what was it? Test tower, they're the same size, the tower and the buff tower. One is just a different color. I want to say the footprint is about like 32 by 32 and the height is like 64. All right, so it is. Yeah, the footprint is 32 by 32. The size is. The dimensions are from -16 to +, and it is about 64 units tall. The extra 4 being the little these things. I forget what they're called on castle walls sticking out of the top. So we'll say it's that. Okay, -16, -16, 0. Don't need the extra arguments. That needs to be a comma. And P2 is going to be positive at 64. For foes. For foes, that'll be different sizes. Like I said, I will probably get that information out of a model file or something in the future, so that like a bigger tower can exist and a smaller tower can exist or something like that. But also certainly for the map editor, there are differently sized objects. But for now, this will do. And this variable belongs to the root entity object in the hierarchy, so this will be inherited by all of the other things as well. Environment entity, I am not concerned with you. Bullet entity, you don't need any collision information as far as I'm concerned. Tower. Tower is what I want. So, if I run the game now, nothing is going to happen. Actually, you know what? I will, instead of putting it in the tower, since this is potentially to be used by some other things, let us put the raycast function in the root entity object as well. And that can be inherited or overridden by the descendants based on what they need to do. If the, like foes, for example, could be approximated as spheres. If you need to, if you want to select a foe, see its current HP, how much damage it'll do if it hits the end, that kind of thing. Or since bullets are essentially bullets and probably should be represented by line casts, which is slightly different from a raycast, we'll want a raycast function against that as well. Actually, I just forgot what I said 2 minutes ago about not making those methods for purposes relating to speeds. Let me make another script. I'll put it in the help group. Let's call it. Let's go into collision, and collision can contain some functions. I'll prefix them with call because collision. And we'll say ray AABB. And it will take an axis aligned bounding box and array, which is going to have some information. I will define rays later. Actually, no, I won't. I will define them now, because that seems like something that is important to have. The ray is going to take a few arguments. It's going to have an origin and a direction. Both of those are going to be vector 3s. And the AABB is just going to be a struct with a P1 and a P2. Okay. And we'll see. I know how I'm going to stitch this together later, but first I have to actually do this math. Let's see. I am going to speed this typing up to 10 times, and I'm probably not going to explain most of it because this is not going to be an explanation for how 3D collision math works video. It's just going to be a let's see how we can use it video. Okay. Okay. In theory, this should work. This should return true if a array defined by an origin point and a direction vector intersects an axis-aligned bounding box with a minimum and a maximum point. Like I said, I've never used this in a game before, but this is what the math looks like, and I'm hoping it works on the first try because that would be great. All right. So what I'm gonna do is rather than making this function a method, I'm going to just assign the function as a variable without making it a method. The difference between that and a method is that methods run in the scope of an instance, and it has access to all of its instance variables, all of its other methods, and all the stuff that belongs to it. And if you simply attach a function, what was it called? Call raycast AABB. If you simply assign a function like this to an instance, it won't do any of that. It'll still be running in the scope of whatever is previously calling the code. It won't have access to any of the instance variables or anything like that. It's slightly faster, and like I said, since this code might be running a potentially large number of times, that is probably something that you want, more so than the convenience that comes from running methods. Things like the update and the render methods down here, I'm kind of accepting that performance hit because it makes the code much easier to write. But hopefully after this video, or maybe after another 2, depending on what else I need to do, I won't have to touch this raycasting code again, and it'll just be a done deal, and I won't, having the code be kind of like messy looking won't be the end of the world, and it won't cause any issues for future me. Anyway, this just returns a true or a false depending on if something is hit. Some raycast functions, some more advanced raycast functions may return instead the point in space where a hit is detected. That's that would be nice, but since I'm just going to be checking it against a bunch of things in the world, I don't really care about that right now. Let's see. It's definitely possible later on that might become relevant. For example, if you have 3 towers really close to each other, if you try to click on one, you might accidentally select another, and the player would probably hope that the tower that they select is the one that's closest to them, but that's worry for another day. So all this is responsible for spawning a tower. I think let's farm that out to another function called spawn tower. That can go here. Let's just put it here. Again, this is a method because it is specifically a function that is created in the body of a struct. If you had a function defined somewhere else that you wanted to make a method for an instance or a struct or something, you could use the method function, which would do it for you. I'm not going to get into that right now. Anyway, first let's spawn a tower and run the game without doing anything else. This should simply do what it did before. And yeah, there we go. I can spawn a tower. I can also spawn them on top of each other. As you can see, there is no like collision checking to see if anything's in the way first. Why did the game crash when I hit the Interesting. Why did the game crash when I hit the X button? I didn't change anything related to like data or anything. I just added a... Hang on. Let me find that repository. I didn't change anything related to data. I just... Okay.
Hey.
That's very odd. I just wrote a couple lines of code for, like, raycast. None of this should crash the game. And the only other thing that was changed was like this. Something. And that shouldn't crash the game either. Is that really what's crashing the game? Why? Thank you for playing Wing Commander, I guess. I'll deal with that later. So it seems to only crash if there's more than one... If there's more than one thing? Apparently? I don't know why. Computers are weird. I don't understand them. Okay. Anyway, before we spawn a tower, we will loop through all of the existing towers to see if you have clicked on one. And we can do that by saying... And we will be checking the raycast with if, what is it? Tower.raycast, tower.aabb, and array, which we will be defining as a, it's really just a structure containing the camera's position, which is the origin, and the direction of the mouse vector. And the direction of the mouse vector should be stored in the camera object. Mousecast, is that a screen to world? Does that return a vector 3? Where's screen to world? That does return a vector 3. Okay. So the ray is just going to be... What is it? New ray, which has an origin and a direction. What is it? Camera dot position. Camera dot from. Okay. You can tell I haven't messed with this in a little while. Camera dot. I've already forgotten. Is it mouse ray? Mousecast. Camera dot mousecast. All right, so for raycast is detected, first we're just going to say... Actually, I'll just show message. All right, let's see if this is going to work on the first try. So I'm going to... It'll still spawn a second tower because there's nothing telling it to stop doing that. But... some code ran. Unable to convert to integer, result is nan. My favorite. Oh. That's awkward. Okay, so that wasn't actually the raycasting code that crashed the game. That was some other code that crashed the game. Now I've got a different error. Tower.aabb. And that is probably because I called it like bbox instead of aabb. The joys of using a dynamically typed language that does not enforce things to be determined on compile time. And there we go. We have detected a raycast. If I click out there, it's not going to do it. If I click like up there, it will. And it'll detect them over and over, which is fun. And it crashed. And I don't know why. Actually, hang on. Let me try that again. I think that might have not done exactly what I wanted it to. First time, it didn't... Okay, for one, I can definitely think of one error, and... Okay, is it not to do with spawning towers, but to do with enemies spawning in the world? That's weird. Anyway. One obvious error is the position of the B box, because they're all essentially at the world origin, and they shouldn't be. So we have to add make this all relative to the world origin, to the actual positions. That'll be plus, and 64. All right, I was gonna say that worked on the first try. Is that too good to be true? My code worked on the first try. I'm immediately suspicious. And... interesting. Detected those, or it's detecting things that I'm not clicking on. Okay, so the math is wrong. Math is definitely wrong. The game is still crashing when I close it. The hunt is on. Okay, so I had a greater than symbol in the wrong place. Let's see if that fixes it. All right, you are clicked. You are not. There should be, if I click here, there should be two things popping up. 1, 2. Excellent. Okay. 1, 2, and possibly 3, depending on if the third one was in the range. Alright, I think the math is fixed. Now let's see if things still explode when I close the game. Nothing exploded when I closed the game. I don't know why that is. That's very odd. Anyway, now that I have reasonable evidence that the math is working, it was almost working on the first try. If only I didn't reverse those two operands in the comparison, it would have been working on the first try. Instead, I am going to I'll set that to undefined. So we're going to see what was clicked, and we will attempt to select the thing that was like nearest to you that was clicked. So if nothing else has been clicked, we're going to assign the value of the tower to that clicked variable. Otherwise, if the tower dot... Okay, you know what? Since that is going to be an immensely long line of code that I do not want to have on the screen, or at least I want to mitigate slightly, var we're going to compare the distance. Oh my god. If you move your arrow keys too quickly, for whatever reason, and you control V, where even was I? You will, for whatever reason, jump down to the bottom of the file, and it's very annoying. Anyway, compare the distance of the two towers. If this tower dist is closer than there we go. So we'll be selecting the closer of the two towers. And then at the end of this loop, if you did click on something, you will do something, which is probably going to be selecting that tower. And if you did not click on something, you will just spawn a new one, if possible. Okay. Let's see how much I'm allowed to get away with. So I'm clicking on the first tower that we spawned, and nothing's happening. That's good. If I go over here, they can still get pretty close together, and there's probably something to be said for making the bounding boxes of towers bigger than the actual tower models, so that you have a little bit more to make it easier to click on things. But anyway, you can see I am not clicking on you. I did click on you. I'm sorry, I'm not building anything when I click on you, and then I do over here. And then the game froze out of nowhere. Okay, so let's commit these changes. And then, because that is very annoying, let's see if I can figure out why that was happening. Nothing changed besides the collision math since the last video. Nothing in the update loop changed except anything that happens when you click the mouse button, and the game was not crashing when I clicked the mouse button. I can't imagine the simple fact that these extra variables have been assigned is what's crashing the game. And this isn't used outside of those last two things that I mentioned. Alright, first order of business is to see if I can identify exactly what actions I take that cause that to happen. It always seems to happen about when the second thing comes in. Okay, no, so that time it only crashed when I placed the tower. The only substantial hint I really have is that it's taking offense at this. and I am unable to figure out why. I don't know if there's an issue with like the garbage collector and all these structs or something. I don't know if there shouldn't be. I know the garbage collector has at least one issue, but that regards it like not running when it's supposed to run rather than running incorrectly. And that you only will see that error if you do one very specific thing with it, such as turn it off, which I have not done. If I just name it something else, will that fix it? Will that take care of things? I don't think so. Yeah. Is it just taking offense at the fact that there is an anonymous struct? Inside the constructor here. That's once again a very specific thing to complain about, and I feel like if that was an issue with the engine, someone in Game Maker Land would have found it by now. But so far, wow, that's very strange. Like these are the only major changes that I had made to anything in the actual game as of when the crash started happening. So it makes sense that it would be something to do with that line. I don't understand why there would be an issue with the code that was there before. But okay. Also, I can make this just because that's easier to work with. And I prefer it that way. And we can make this, we can have this go back to what it was before with those. Okay. If speed becomes a concern, I will make them arrays later instead of structs. It's an optimization talk for another day. I've said several times now that optimization talks would be for another day, and I haven't done them yet, but really, they will be another day. I have a set of Game Maker optimization videos planned that I haven't really done anything yet. Anyway, that's okay. If I'm able to replicate that bug later on, I'll submit a bug report. That's annoying. I also don't know why it was crashing the game, apparently outside of the events, which I feel like means the garbage collector was trying to garbage collect them and was failing. Because there's not a lot that happens, or at least in this game, there's no like asynchronous code or anything running. There's no network loading happening or anything like that. I guess there's input-output processing, like keyboard and mouse events, but that is not in any way, shape, or form related to the code that was here. I feel like this was a garbage collector issue.
Hey.
All right, who knows? Maybe by the time this video goes out, there will be an update to Game Maker that will fix that. Is there anything else I want to do now, though? Because I did spend a lot of time doing that. I'm an hour into the recording, and I think I spent like 35 minutes trying to track down that bug. Engine bugs are the worst. Fortunately, they don't happen often. They happen more often now that Game Maker did receive a major update not too long ago, but they're still fairly rare. But when they do happen, nobody likes you, engine bugs. Okay, so I'm not allowed to spawn more things on top of other things. That's fine. I'd like to have an indication that a tower is selected before I go. Also, before I go. Alright, fix the anonymous struct bug by not making them anonymous. Some things would make no sense at all if you said them in a context outside of programming. Alright. There is the matter of having an entity selected. Alright, I won't keep a selected variable. I will keep the variable in here which decides if which tells us something was clicked on. This will also not be a local variable, but it will be an instance variable somewhere down here. And we can have different things happen depending on what type this is. For example, an easy thing might be if you go into the render for towers. Where is entity tower? If you go into render, perhaps if you are selected, you can set a shader and have you flash a certain color or something like that. Just an indication that you're selected. And then later on the user interface, there will be like buttons and stuff appearing. Let me create a shader. I'll leave that in the collection of temporary assets. If that should be capitalized, game.selected entity. We will set the selected shader, and the otherwise it's just rendered with chicken shader, right? Chicken fragment shader, fragment shading shader. Yeah. There is a cost to shaders. Are one of the like draw state values, and setting the shader will interrupt the draw state and cause and it will take some amount of time because communicating between different parts of hardware takes time. And if you can avoid setting the shader constantly, you should. Other things do that. Obviously, that's not the only thing in this block of code that does that. Setting the world matrix is surprisingly expensive, and I might actually be able to speed this up a little just by commenting this out and having matrix worlds for everything before it's drawn, but optimization talks. Anyway, shader selected, that will be a cleaned up fragment shader, a vertex shader which will take a normal. Hang on, let me get all the default stuff out of here. I get that it's kind of there to make it easier for people to understand who've never seen shaders before or who have limited experience with shaders, but the amount of mess, like in position.x, in position.y, in position.z, the amount of mess that is in the default shaders does upset me a little bit. It makes sense for in normal to be commented out because that's something that if you try to use the sprite drawing functions or other things in GameMaker will the normal will not be provided, and then if you try to draw as one of those with a shader that uses the normal, you'll have a vertex format error and nothing will be drawn. But the in position.xyz annoys me. What do I want to do? I want to make this like flash white. How am I going to do that? Well, the way I can do that is to just make it white. But to make it flash, I'll need like a time variable, and I'll need to make it fade to white depending on the time variable. There we go. You're white. You are blue. You turn white when you're selected. You are not lit. I don't think I'll be making them lit. I want them to be unlit if they're selected or something like that, just to make them stand out against the world. If you have a white plus lighting facets, it might look a little bit weird, and it'll be less clear what it does. It'll be more clear if you have an unlit tower in a world of lit things, that something special is happening with that tower. Okay. Anyway, to make it fade, make that base color, I'll have a uniform float time, and let's see, base color plus, I'm going to have something like the sine of time times vector 4, and since that's going to oscillate between 0 and between -1 and +1, and I want it to oscillate between 0 and 1, let's 0.5 plus, and we need parentheses here, 0.5 times the sign, and this entire thing will be you won't be able to have color values exceeding 1, essentially. All right, and the actual time itself, shader set uniform, and the current time in milliseconds since the game started divided by 1,000. It's going to be the number of seconds that the game has been running. All right. So if I spawn you, you do indeed flash. I'd like you to flash faster. If I spawn a blue one, it flashes to... All right, there we go. The unlit color is doing its job. It's more noticeable on there. I would definitely like you to flash faster, so let's make that time times 4. Again, modifying the period of a sine wave. That should be 4 point, because implicit typecasts are not something that GLSLES generally will do for you, although there is like one specific place where it will. Okay, there we go. It's not quite working because we're adding to the color instead of like multiplying by it, but you know what we can do is lerp. It's mix in GLSLES, not lerp. But lerping to white based on this equation instead of adding to it, which will probably, that'll cut down on a lot of the math that needs to be done, I think. That's more what I was hoping for. And we can even make that faster, increase the period a little bit, make it 8. I don't want to make it too fast because I don't want to have to put an epilepsy warning on this or anything, but all right, that's pretty good, I think. It looks like that's a reasonably fast flashing. Every one period is a little bit less than a second, about 3/4 of a second, because sine and cosine are in radians. 1 revolution is 6.28 seconds. Okay, I think that's good enough. I am going to, what did I close? I closed the entity script. I am going to leave it off here. We have selected towers. That was an adventure. I've been recording this for an hour, 12 minutes. I hope I can cut this down a lot because bug hunting took a while and there was a select amount of actually important stuff in there. Hooray! It feels good to have all this done in one video. All right, so the code for this. Is going to be GitHub video description. Have a look. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute towards these videos being made, I have a link to that in all the usual places also. I try to post a couple game dev videos a week. There's one of these on Wednesdays, and there's a couple other tutorial type videos, generally dealing with 3D because I like 3D and also other things. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. I also do not like bugs, which is why I'm making a game about them, and why I just spent the last 40 minutes trying to get rid of one. I guess that's it. I hope you found that useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Edward Holt, Indie Punch, Posho Dev, and Zenith for supporting these videos. If you want your name in the credits and to force me to say them out loud at the end, head over to the Patreon page in the video description and join the fun.